The moment I saw him walk out of my front door, something in my chest didn't break. It went quiet. I left the office 40 minutes early. Nothing dramatic, just a slow Tuesday, a headache building behind my eyes, and the simple thought of home. I parked on the street instead of the driveway because of an old habit. Sarah always said the engine noise startled her when she was resting. I almost laughed at that later. I was still 10 steps from the gate when the front door opened. Danish, my neighbor, the man whose lawn touched mine, the man I'd shared dinner with, argued cricket scores with, lent my toolbox without a second thought. He stepped out of my house, adjusting his collar with one hand, running the other through his hair, the lazy, unhurried movements of a man completely at ease, not a visitor leaving, something far more comfortable than that. I stopped walking. I don't know why I didn't call out. Some instinct, some cold, quiet thing that told me, wait, look. So I looked, and then the door shifted, just a few inches, and Sarah appeared in the gap. My wife, short nightgown, hair loose, one hand curled around the edge of the door, the other raised in a small, soft wave. Not a polite goodbye, not a neighbor at the door wave, the kind of wave you give someone when you don't want the moment to end. Danish smiled at her, a private smile, one I recognized from years of watching people. And then he turned and walked across to his house without looking back, like a man who'd done this before, like a man who planned to do it again. Sarah watched him go. She didn't see me. I was standing in plain sight of my own front gate, and my wife did not see me because her eyes were only for him. I stood there for what felt like a long time, maybe 20 seconds, maybe a year. Then I turned around. I walked back to my car, sat inside it. I didn't scream, didn't punch the steering wheel, didn't cry. I just sat there, engine off, hands in my lap, while something rearranged itself permanently inside me. Don't react, something said. Not a voice, a decision. Don't let them know. Not yet. I waited 11 minutes. I counted. Then I got out, walked to the door, and rang the bell of my own house. Sarah opened it in a skirt now, hair pinned back, the nightgown gone like it had never existed. Her face lit up. "Rayan, you're home early." Too bright, too fast, the words already prepared. "Slow day," I said. I smiled at her. She smiled back. I walked inside, set my bag down, and asked if there was coffee. She went to the kitchen, already talking about something, a show she'd been watching, a call from her mother, and I sat on the sofa in my own living room and looked at the door she had stood behind an hour ago. The same door, the same house, the same woman in the kitchen, now humming softly. Everything is identical. Everything was destroyed. When she brought the coffee and sat beside me, tucking her feet under her the way she always did, she said, "You seem tired." "I'm fine," I told her. And then I did the thing that I think unsettled me most about myself. I leaned over and kissed her cheek. She smiled, warm and easy, completely unbothered. And I thought, she's good at this. And then I thought, so am I. That night, lying in the dark beside her while she slept, I stared at the ceiling and felt the plan arrive, not in pieces, not with effort, all at once. Complete. Our anniversary was in 2 weeks. We had already talked about a small party, family, close friends. Perfect, I thought. Sarah shifted in her sleep and her hand found mine automatically, fingers curling around my knuckles. I let her hold it and I stared at the ceiling and I smiled. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It was pretending the anger didn't exist. The next morning I watched her differently. Not obviously. I didn't stare, didn't go cold, didn't give her a single reason to suspect anything had shifted. I watched the way a man watches a card player across the table. Quietly. Cataloging. Her phone, I noticed, always landed face down now when she set it on the counter. A small thing. The kind of thing a person stops noticing in a marriage, until suddenly it's the only thing you see. She texted more than usual. Always with a small, private expression. Not smiling exactly, just lit. The way a face looks when it's receiving something it wants. I said nothing. I passed Danish on the street 2 days later. He raised his hand in that easy wave of his, called out, "Ray and buddy, how are you?" The voice of a man with nothing on his conscience. "Excellent," I said. "Life is very good." He nodded, smiled, and went inside. I watched his door close and thought, enjoy it. On the fourth day, I called Hina. She was my colleague of 6 years, the kind of person who'd seen me through a failed promotion, a family crisis, and a flooded office. Steady, sharp, and honest to the point of discomfort. I met her for lunch at a small cafe near the office, sat across from her, told her everything without decoration. She didn't gasp, didn't immediately flood me with sympathy. She just looked at me for a long moment and said, "How are you holding it together?" "Because falling apart is for after," I said. "Right now, I need to think." "What are you planning?" I told her about the anniversary party. The guests, Sarah's parents, Danish, invited by my own hand. I told her what I wanted to do. Hina was quiet for a while. Then, "Rayan, are you sure? Once you do this, there's no going back." I looked at her. "She made sure of that," I said. "Not me." Hina exhaled slowly. Then she nodded. One firm nod, the kind that meant I'm in. "Tell me what you need." The recording device was small, barely the size of a matchbox. Hina sourced it, didn't ask questions, just placed it in my hand the next morning in the office parking lot like we were exchanging car keys. That evening, I tucked it behind the row of books on the living room shelf, between a Manto collection and a dusty Urdu dictionary, angled toward the sofa where Sarah always took her afternoon calls. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I came home for lunch, parked quietly, and let myself in through the back. Sarah was on the sofa, phone to her ear, voice low and warm in the way it used to be with me. I stood in the hallway and listened for exactly 4 seconds, enough to confirm, not enough to unravel myself, then went back out, sat in my car, and drove back to the office. That evening, I retrieved the recording while Sarah was in the shower. I sat at the edge of the bed with my earphones in and pressed play. Her voice came through first. He had no idea Danish. He came home and I had literally just... And then laughter. Hers. Then his. And then her voice again, light and careless as a woman who believed she was completely safe. "He has no idea." 4 words. I pulled the earphones out, sat with it for a moment. Then I saved the file to my phone, made 2 backup copies, and deleted nothing. The next day I walked into the office, sat down at my desk, and began designing the anniversary slideshow. Photos first, our wedding, trips, dinners, the ordinary, beautiful evidence of a life built together. I arranged them carefully, chronologically, with soft background music. And at the end, after the last photograph faded to black, the audio, her voice, his laughter. "He has no idea." 11 seconds, that was all it would take. Hina reviewed it with me after office hours. The door closed. When the audio played, she went very still. "Rayan." "It stays in," I said. She didn't argue. That evening, I did the one thing that required the most control of everything I had done so far. I called Kareem, Sarah's father, a good man. The kind of father-in-law who called me beta and meant it, who pressed money into my hand at holiday, even when I protested, who had once told me, "You're the son I asked God for." My jaw tightened when I heard his voice. "Kareem, uncle," I said warmly. "I want to do something special for Sarah at the anniversary party. A speech segment is something from family. I need your help." A pause. Then, on the smile in his voice, unmistakable. "Beta, you're going to make her cry." "I know," I said, and I meant it in a way he couldn't possibly understand yet. There is a particular kind of power in being underestimated by the people who should know you best. I had lived inside that power for 2 weeks now. I was beginning to understand why patience is the most dangerous thing a quiet man can possess. The invitations went out on a Thursday. Sarah handled the guest list with the enthusiasm of a woman who believed she was being celebrated. She sat at the kitchen table with her phone, reading names aloud, adding people, removing people, completely in her element. I sat across from her with tea, nodding, agreeing, offering nothing that would disturb the performance. "Danish brother and his family?" she asked, and I watched her face when she said it. Casual. Practices. The name dropped in the middle of others like it weighed nothing. "Obviously," I said, "he's practically family." Something moved behind her eyes. Relief, I think, dressed up as indifference. "I'll add them," she said simply, and looked back at her phone. I called Danish myself the next evening. Not because I needed to. The invitation was already sent. I called because I wanted to hear his voice. because I wanted to stand on the other side of what he thought was an ordinary friendship and feel exactly how solid the ground was beneath my feet. He picked up on the second ring. "Rayon, brother, what's up?" "Danish," I said warmly. "The anniversary party. You're coming, right? I need you there, brother. You're practically part of this house." A half-second pause. Barely anything. A man recalibrating. "Of course," he said. "Wouldn't miss it." "Good," I said. "It's going to be a night nobody forgets." "Sounds great, brother." "It will be," I said. "It really will be." I hung up and stood in the silence of my bedroom for a moment. Then I went to have dinner with my wife. Sarah was luminous in those 2 weeks. That's the word for it. Luminous. She threw herself into the party planning with a joy that was almost painful to watch. Flowers, catering, the precise arrangement of tables, the color of the tablecloths. She cared about everything. She cared about the party the way a woman cares about something she believes is entirely hers. I helped her with all of it. Carried boxes, tasted food samples, approved decorations, held the measuring tape against the wall while she decided where the fairy lights should end. "I can't believe you planned all this for us," she said one evening, standing in the middle of the decorated living room, looking around with soft eyes. I looked at her. "You deserve exactly what's coming to you," I said. She turned to me with the most genuine smile I had seen from her in months. "That's the most romantic thing you've said in years," I smiled back. Danish came by 3 days before the party, under the preteens of confirming the time, though we both knew the invitation had the time printed clearly on it. He stood at my door, comfortable, easy, a man visiting a friend. 7 o'clock, right?" he asked. 7, I confirmed. "Come a little early if you can. I want the people who matter most there from the beginning." He nodded, clapped my shoulder. "You're a good man, Rayon." I looked at him steadily. "I know," I said, and smiled, and closed the door. The slideshow I finalized 2 nights before the party. Hina came over under the cover of helping with setup. Sarah had met her before, liked her well enough, and thought nothing of it. While Sarah directed the caterer in the kitchen, Hina sat with me at the laptop in the study, headphones shared between us, running through the presentation one final time. The photos played beautifully. Our wedding. A trip to Lahore. Sarah is laughing at a table somewhere, head thrown back, genuinely happy in some moment from 3 years ago. It hurt briefly. I allowed it. Then I moved past it. The final photo faded. Black screen. Then, Sarah's voice, clear as a confession in a quiet room. "He had no idea, Danish. He came home and I had literally just..." Laughter. "He has no idea." 11 seconds of silence followed in the room. Hina pulled out her earbuds slowly. She didn't look at me right away. "You're sure about the timing?" she finally asked. "After Kareem Baba's speech," I said. "When the whole room is warm, when everyone is feeling it." She nodded quietly. "And you?" she asked. "How are you feeling?" I thought about it honestly. "Like a man who's been holding his breath for 2 weeks," I said, "and is almost ready to exhale." The night before the party, Sarah came to bed late. I heard her checking on the decorations one more time, moving something in the kitchen, the small domestic sounds of a woman proud of what she'd built. She slid into bed carefully, trying not to wake me. I kept my eyes closed. She lay there for a moment, then she moved close, rested her head against my shoulder, and in the dark, soft, completely unguarded, "I love you, Rayan." I stared at the ceiling. I counted my own heartbeats. By tomorrow night, I thought, every person you love will know exactly who you are. I said nothing. I let her fall asleep against my shoulder. And I lay there in the dark with my eyes open, completely still, the way a man lies still when he is finally completely ready. The night was beautiful. I want to say that honestly, because it was. The lights were warm. The food smelled extraordinary. The room was full of people who loved us, or thought they did, or thought they knew us. Sarah was radiant in deep burgundy, moving through the room like a woman who had earned this moment. In a way, I suppose she had. Guests arrived between 7 and 7:30. Sarah's parents came first, Nadia auntie in her best sari, Kareem uncle in a pressed pent shirt, his face carrying that particular pride of a father watching his daughter's life look exactly the way he'd prayed it would. He embraced me at the door, both hands on my shoulders, looking at me the way he always did, like I was something he'd chosen carefully and never regretted. "Beta," he said warmly, "you've done something beautiful tonight." "I tried," I said. "I wanted everything to be exactly right." He nodded, deeply satisfied, and went inside. I watched him go. "Forgive me, uncle," I thought, "for what the next hour will do to you." Danish arrived at 7:20 with his wife Sana, a quiet, decent woman who deserved none of what her husband had handed her. She carried a gift box and smiled at Sarah at the door, and I watched the two women embrace and felt the specific ugliness of that moment settle in my stomach. Danish shook my hand, firm, warm, completely unbothered. "The place looks incredible, Rayon brother. Thank you for being here," I said. "Truly, it wouldn't have felt right without you." Something briefly, almost imperceptibly, moved across his face, then it was gone. He smiled and walked inside. By 8 o'clock, the room was full and alive. Laughter crossed the space in waves. Sarah's cousin was telling a story that had 3 people doubled over. Nadia auntie was admiring the flowers. Kareem uncle was in the corner with my uncle, the two of them locked in the kind of conversation that old men fall into and never want to leave. Sarah found me near the window and slipped her hand into mine. "Happy?" she asked. I looked at her face, at ease in it, the comfort. "Almost," I said. She laughed and squeezed my hand, thinking she understood me. At 8:30, Hina, seated near the laptop at the side table, positioned there under the reasonable cover of managing the music, caught my eye across the room. One look, a question. I gave her the smallest nod. She straightened slightly, opened the presentation file, positioned her hand. Ready. I picked up the small wireless microphone from the table and moved to the center of the room. "Excuse me, everyone." The room settled. Conversations tapered. Faces turned toward me, warm and expectant. Sarah looked up from across the room, her expression open, happy, a little surprised. She pressed a hand to her chest the way women do when they're about to be moved. I smiled at the room. 15 years ago, I began, I made a promise, to one person, in front of everyone I loved. Soft sounds from the crowd. Someone said, "Aw." Nadia auntie already had her hand over her mouth. Tonight, I want to honor that. I've put together something, and a few memories, a few truths. I looked at Kareem uncle when I said the word truths. He was beaming. "Hina," I said quietly, "please go ahead." The lights dimmed slightly. The projector screen lit up, and the photographs began. Our wedding day. Sarah in red, laughing at something just off camera. More beautiful than I had words for, even now. The room responded immediately. Warmth, sighs, the sound of people genuinely moved. More photos, a trip, a dinner, a candid moment in a kitchen somewhere, Sarah standing on her toes to reach a shelf, me behind her with my hands on her waist. Nadia auntie was crying already, quietly, happily, the tears of a mother watching the evidence of her daughter's happiness slide past in golden light. Kareem uncle sat very still, a small, proud smile on his face. Danish stood near the back of the room, drink in hand, watching the screen with the comfortable expression of a man at someone else's celebration. Sarah had both hands pressed to her face now, shoulders shaking with quiet emotion. "Rayan," she whispered, barely audible. The last photograph appeared. Our most recent anniversary, 1 year ago exactly. Sarah and I at a restaurant, her head on my shoulder, both of us looking at the camera. The room was completely still, warm, full, perfect. The photo faded, black screen, and then her voice, filling the room from every speaker, clear and bright and utterly recognizable. He had no idea Danish. He came home and I had literally just... Laughter, hers, then his, a beat. He has no idea. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. It moved through the room in a wave. Confusion first, then comprehension, then horror. I watched it cross face after face like weather moving across open ground. Sarah's hands dropped from her face. She had gone the color of paper. Danish's drink stopped halfway to his mouth, stayed there, like his arm had forgotten what it was doing. Sana, his wife, turned to look at him slowly. The way you turn to look at something you already know is going to be terrible. And Kareem Uncle, who had been sitting with that small, proud smile. I watched the smile leave his face, not quickly, slowly, the way light leaves a room when the sun goes down, gradually, and then all at once, and then completely. He looked at Sarah. Sarah's mouth opened. "Rayan!" Her voice came out fractured. "Stop, please. I can explain." "The recording already did," I said quietly. The microphone was still in my hand. My voice was perfectly level. I want to be honest about that. I had expected to feel more at this moment, rage or grief or triumph. But standing there, I felt only a strange, absolute calm. The calm of a man who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time and has finally set it down. "That was 2 weeks ago," I said to the room. "Not performing, just speaking. I came home early. I saw Danish leaving my house." I paused. I saw my wife say goodbye to him. "Rayan, please." Sarah took a step toward me. "Don't." Just the word, nothing attached to it. She stopped. Danish put his drink down on the nearest table, straightened his collar, the same unconscious gesture I had watched him make walking out of my front door 2 weeks ago. "Some habits, I suppose, don't know when to stop. This is being taken out of context," he started. "Danish." His name in my mouth stopped him. "There is no context," I said. "That fixes this." The room was motionless. No one breathed loudly. No one moved toward the door. They all just stood in the wreckage of the last 11 seconds, holding their glasses and their gift boxes and their warm evening, understanding that none of it was what they'd thought it was. Sana was staring at her husband, not with tears, not yet, with the specific, terrible expression of a woman reorganizing everything she knows. And Kareem Uncle? He stood up, slowly. With the heaviness of a man carrying something he didn't arrive with, he looked at his daughter. Sarah. Just her name. But the way he said it, I cannot describe what was in it, a lifetime of pride and the sound of it breaking. "Uncle," Sarah's voice cracked completely. She began to cry, not graceful tears, real ones, ugly and desperate, the kind that come when there is nothing left to manage. I looked at her for a moment, then I set the microphone down on the table beside me, gently, the way you set down something that no longer belongs to you. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair where I'd placed it at the start of the evening. I walked toward the door. "Rayan." Sarah's voice behind me, raw, broken, stripped of everything that had made it so easy and so warm all these weeks. I stopped. I turned. And I looked at her one final time across the room, across the fairy lights and the flowers, and the catered food, and the people standing in devastated silence between us. Her face was ruined with crying. She looked at me the way a person looks when they understand, for the first time, the full weight of what they've done. "Where are you going?" she whispered. I held her gaze for a moment. "To start over," I said, and I walked out of my own house, into the night, into the quiet, into something that, for the first time in months, felt like air. He didn't slam the door. He closed it softly. That was the part nobody in that room would forget. The strange thing about finally doing the thing you've been dreading is that the morning after feels nothing like you expected. I had expected emptiness. What I found instead was silence. And silence, I discovered, can be the kindest thing in the world. When you've been living inside noise for so long, you forgot what quiet felt like. I had moved everything that mattered 2 weeks ago. Not everything I owned, just everything that was mine. Documents. The savings account Sarah didn't know the updated password to. My father's watch from the drawer beside the bed. 3 suits, books. The small framed photo of my mother that had sat on my side of the dresser for 11 years. I had done it in careful increments. A bag here, a folder there, while Sarah planned centerpieces and argued with the caterer over appetizers. She had been so beautifully distracted. The apartment I'd rented was small. 1 bedroom, 1 window that faced east, a kitchen that smelled faintly of fresh paint. I had paid the first 3 months in advance and left a spare key with Hina. That night, after walking out of my own party, I drove there directly. No detours, no sitting in the car outside the old house, no last looks. I had already looked enough. I slept better than I had in months. That surprised me most. I had expected to lie awake, to replay the room, to hear Sarah's voice breaking on my name, But the moment I lay down on the narrow mattress in that quiet apartment, something in my body simply let go. I woke at 7 to my phone face down on the floor beside me where it had slipped from my hand. I picked it up. 41 missed calls, 38 from Sarah, 2 from her cousin, 1 from a number I didn't recognize, and 1 from Hina. I called Hina first. She picked up immediately. She'd clearly been awake. "Are you all right?" "Yes," I said, and meant it. "The room was completely silent when you left," she said quietly. Nobody moved for almost a full minute. Then Kareem Sahib walked straight to Sarah, and Rayan, he didn't comfort her. He just looked at her and walked to the door himself. I closed my eyes briefly. "And Danish?" Sana left without him. He tried to follow her to the car and she locked the door from inside. A pause. He stood in the parking area for 10 minutes. Then he went home alone. I said nothing. "You did what you needed to do," Hina said. Not as comfortable as a fact. "I know," I said. "Thank you for everything. Call me if you need anything." "I will." I did not call Sarah back. I read every message she sent, not out of cruelty, but because I believed I owed myself the truth of what she said when she had nothing left to perform for. The first messages were desperate, fractured, the grammar of a woman typing through tears. "Ryan, please pick up. Please. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to..." Then longer ones. Explanations that explained nothing. Justifications that collapsed under their own weight. The word mistake appeared 7 times across 3 messages, as though repetition could change its meaning. And then, near dawn, a single message that was different from the rest. "I know you won't answer. I just need to say, you didn't deserve any of this. You were never the problem." I was. "I'm sorry." I read it twice. Then I set the phone down and made tea. At 9:15, an unknown number called again. I almost let it ring out. Something made me answer. Rayan Beta. Kareem Uncle. His voice. Older somehow than it had been 12 hours ago. Heavier, like a man who had aged in the night. I gripped the phone. "Uncle?" I said carefully. A long silence. The kind that isn't empty. The kind that is too full for words to enter easily. "I'm not calling to ask you to go back," he said finally. "I want you to know that first. What I saw last night, what I heard." His voice caught. He steadied it with the discipline of an old man who has survived harder things than this. "That is not something I will ask you to forgive." I said nothing. There was nothing to say yet. "I am calling," he continued, "because I have known you for 15 years, and I know what kind of man you are." Another pause. The kind who will spend the next year asking himself what he missed, what he did wrong, whether he was somehow... "Uncle, let me finish, Beta." I stopped. "You were a good husband," he said. "I watched you for 15 years. You were patient and you were present and you were good. What happened in that house was not because of a failure in you." His voice dropped lower. "That was her failure, only hers. And I say this as her father." The apartment was completely quiet around me. The morning light was coming through the east window now, falling across the floor in a long, pale rectangle. "Don't carry it," Kareem Uncle said. "You've already carried enough." And something in me, that last remaining thing I had been holding without realizing, some final knot I hadn't known was still pulled tight, came loose. I pressed my hand over my eyes. My voice, when it came, was not the voice of a man who had spent 2 weeks in perfect control. It was just a voice. "Thank you, Uncle," I said. He was quiet for a moment on the other end. Then, "Take care of yourself, Beta. That is all I ask." The line went still. I sat in my chair in my small new apartment for a long time after that. Not crying exactly, something adjacent to it. The physical release of a body that has been tense for weeks and has finally received permission to stop. At 11 o'clock, the unknown number called again. Not Kareem Uncle this time. Sana, Danish's wife. I almost didn't answer, but something, the memory of her face in that room, the way she'd turned to look at her husband, made me pick up. "Rayan, brother," she said. Her voice was steady, remarkably so. "Sana," I said carefully. "I'm sorry you had to find out that way." "No," she said quietly. "I'm not. I needed to find out. A breath. I needed to say thank you. I know that sounds strange." "It doesn't," I said. I had been feeling it for a while, she said. Something off. I told myself I was imagining it. I think some part of me knew and was just... She stopped. Anyway, I wanted you to know you're not alone in this. We were quiet together for a moment. Two people sitting in separate rooms in the wreckage of the same disaster, finding something unexpectedly steadying in the fact of each other's existence. What will you do? I asked. I don't know yet, she said honestly, but I know I won't pretend. Good, I said. After we hung up, I sat for a while longer. Then I got up. I washed my face, put the kettle on again. The afternoon was ordinary. I unpacked the last box I hadn't gotten to, books mostly, and a few things from my desk at home. I arranged them on the small shelf beside the window, the Manto collection, the Urdu dictionary. I paused when I held them. Then I put them on the shelf and stepped back and looked at the room. Small, east-facing, smelling of fresh paint. Mine. Completely, quietly. Only mine. That evening, I sat with one cup of tea at the single chair by the window and watched the light change over the rooftops outside. The city doing what cities do, indifferent and continuous and alive in its ordinary way. I thought about 15 years, not with bitterness. I was surprised to find the bitterness already quieter than I'd expected. More with the particular, complicated feeling of a man sorting through a box of mixed things, deciding what to keep and what to set down. There were good years there, real ones. I would not pretend otherwise. But they are over now. And this small room, this window, this cup of tea is going warm in my hands. This was not an ending. I had planned it as revenge. Sitting there in the evening light, I understood it had become something else entirely. A door. And I was already through it. He didn't win by destroying her. He won by refusing to let her destruction become his. That's the kind of revenge that doesn't need a second act. It just needs a man, a window, and enough silence to finally hear himself again.